I go to a lot of tech conferences, and I feel like the reckoning is kind of in some of the talks, but I love a conference where the whole conference is about the unintended consequences. And what I'm going to talk about today, this is one of my movies. I make a lot of films that try to articulate some of the things we're talking about. But I think what we've really lost is any time for reflection. And I founded the Webby Awards. So I have been immersed in the tech industry from the very beginning in the mid-90s, where we were celebrating, that's me very young, we were celebrating the best of the web, and this is the standard of excellence, and everyone keep trying to push higher to make a better web and to make better tools for humans. And then cut to where we are today, where I certainly think that technology is amazing. I have like a love-hate relationship. And I also worry that we're not being reflective and philosophical enough about the technology that we created. So I also make films. And I make a lot of films about neuroscience, technology, and science. And I'm going to show you, it's been interesting today because I'm also speaking to you as a mother. And anyone dealing with technology, that's a big part of the things we need to be thinking about. And so I'm going to show you a little clip from a movie I made. It's part of this series called The Future Starts Here. And this whole episode was me wrestling with whether to get, my husband and I, to get our daughter a cell phone, a smartphone. So I'm going to show you this little clip. I'm Tiffany Shlain. I'm a mother, filmmaker. I founded the Webby Awards. And this series is about how the future doesn't start somewhere far off in the distance. The future starts here. So on my journey through the history of parenting, I became fascinated with this idea in Neil Postman's book, The Disappearance of Childhood. He talks about how in the medieval times, children were essentially little adults. They weren't shielded from harsh realities and secrets. They wore adult clothing, they gambled. In fact, for most of history, kids began working part-time as early as age 4 and full-time by 10, and there was no thought of managing children's exposure to newer technology or anything else for that matter. So Postman explains that when literacy became widespread, thanks to one of our first technologies, the alphabet, it created a secret language for adults, which all led to a period of time starting around the year 1850 where adults really began controlling what children learned. Parents started to look at childhood as something that needed to be protected, an idyllic time of innocence. They started to guard their children against the flow of information. And that lasted 100 years until the 1950s, when that shifted again because of television, the new exciting technology of that time. And it made it so that information and messages were accessible to everyone. And that's why Postman called this the disappearance of the child. So if you can imagine when they were worried about the television, what are they thinking about the flow of information with smartphones? So we were kind of against the grain. I live in Mill Valley, California. Everyone was getting their kid a smartphone for 5th grade graduation. We were the only one who didn't. We got her a flip phone. This is us signing our flip phone contract. She was also the very last teenager in her high school at Tam High School, which is a public high school, to get a smartphone. She was almost 15 years old. It was the best decision we've ever made. I cannot stress that enough. And again, a lot of people would say, well, isn't she going to miss out socially and all of these things, which, of course, she still had a laptop. She was still online. She just didn't have a supercomputer in her hand every second. So cut to today, there's a pledge that's sweeping the country that's called Wait Till 8th, as in wait till the end of 8th grade till you get your kid a smartphone. I am so excited about this development. Also, there's a new initiative coming out called Away for the Day. Put the phone away for the day. And lastly, this week, I think someone mentioned it, these 2 double New York Times articles that most people in Silicon Valley are keeping their kids away from smartphones and from screens. And lastly, the country of France just banned smartphones in all schools. I think they're ahead of us, literally, in how we need to be thinking about smartphones and developing brains. I do a lot of films about neuroscience, and this is a key moment in children's lives when they're developing their brains.
So, and I was just at this Wired conference, and I really was noticing how many of like the Instagram founder and Facebook just starting to have kids. Talk to me in like 5 or 6 years when your kids are older. So I have a solution for all of this. My family and I, for the last almost 10 years, have practiced what we call technology Shabbats. And I'm Jewish, I'm not religious, but I'm culturally Jewish. I like the comedy and the food and Gilda Radner. But I'm going to show you a little clip from this film on technology Shabbats.
It's like our modern version of a very old Jewish tradition of taking one day off a week called Shabbat. We still drive cars and use electricity, but for us, no screens, no TV, no cell phone, or anything that pulls us away from being together. It's our interpretation of the essence of Shabbat, being present.
And the idea of taking a day off has like happened all over the world in all these different cultures.
To take breaks, pray, do rituals, or to experience time in a different way. In the Jewish tradition, it's from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, what one of my favorite Jewish philosophers, Heschel, calls a palace in time. For Muslims, the sacred day is Friday. For most Christians, it's Sunday. And for the never-distracted Buddha, you could just say that being enlightened, he was having Shabbat all the time.
Talk to you about the palace of time, because I love this metaphor that every Friday night, we usually invite friends and family over for dinner. We have an incredible feast, and every screen goes off. It is absolutely my favorite day of the week. We do art projects, we garden, we just hang out, we space out, we daydream, we read. I print out articles that I want to read deeply. It is the best ritual I've done as a parent and as a human being. I think it's given me a lot of sense of balance. I feel much more creative. On Sunday morning, I'm a filmmaker, and I just feel like so exploded with creativity. I feel a sense of closeness to my family and myself in a way I don't feel during the week. I feel an incredible sense of gratitude. There's a lot of research right now about how much your neurons want silence. We don't have a lot of silence these days with all the buzzing and pinging of everything. And really, I appreciate technology when I go back line at 5 o'clock. My whole family, we can't wait to go back line. Wow, you can just text anyone you think of because we've had a whole day where we don't. But the biggest thing is a sense of reflection. It's been baked into every culture, had a day off. You went to temple, you went to church, you thought about big things. None of us do that anymore. It is evaporated in this 24/7 culture. We live in this kind of hyper-responses amygdala network called the internet, where we don't give ourselves a second to just take a beat. Take a beat and think about what you're about to do. Take a beat and think about that article you just retweeted. Just take a moment. We need to bring that back. We need to bring that back for ourselves, for our children, and just for our sanity and society. I think that's why we're in the current situation we're in our country, and now with Brazil in the world. We really need to think about how we build a prefrontal cortex back in our larger society. If you're interested on this subject, I'm doing a retreat on it at this new retreat center called 1440 in Santa Cruz, coming up next month. And I'm actually writing a book about it for Simon & Schuster that's coming out next year. So I've been loving this conference because I'm just finishing the book right now. And if you want to stay connected with me, because I think we are officially, as Chris has begun, this new community of people that are going to put it on the forefront of our thinking about bringing ethicists and philosophers back into the conversation about technology. And this is how you can stay in touch with me. And the one thought that I'll leave you with is that, you know how for so long it was like STEM, everything's STEM, and then for a while it was STEAM, add an A, add the arts. Yes, add the arts. But my 15-year-old daughter, Odessa, said, well, what about an H? Why don't we get humanities in there? And then I'm also going to add a C for being conscious. So instead of STEAM, it's STEAM. Thank you.